standing before over 100 spectators, reporters, officials, commentators. Packed tight into rows of red velvet seats in the White House, Karoline, with eyes sharp as knives, shouted loud,
"This is the promise President Trump made. Protecting Americans from those who don't belong here. We're not doing this out of hate, but for justice. The girls who've been raped, the families who've lost loved ones. They are why we're fighting."
The whole room burst into flames.
What the hell just happened?
On March 9, 2025, the White House briefing room blazed like a fiery arena. Massive spotlights hung from the ceiling, casting a blinding white glare that reflected off the polished wooden floor like a mirror, creating a space both solemn and tense. Dozens of microphones were fixed tightly to the podium, thick black cables snaking across the floor, connecting to hulking cameras that stood still like steel warriors, their lenses aimed straight at the center stage. Over 100 spectators, reporters, officials, commentators, sat packed into rows of red velvet seats, their murmurs rippling like waves before a massive storm. On the wall behind, the White House seal shimmered in proud gold, but today it was just a backdrop for a showdown about to erupt, where words sharp as knives and emotions burning like fire would clash without mercy. Karoline Leavitt, press secretary to President Donald Trump, stepped up to the podium with a steadfast demeanor. Her navy mousse suit hugged her frame, her blonde hair pulled back neatly, her deep blue eyes glinting with unshakable resolve. At 28, she was one of the youngest ever to take on this role, but her voice, booming through the speakers, and her piercing gaze showed she wasn't one to be easily subdued. Facing her, in the front row, was Jeff Carter, a veteran reporter from Bloomberg. With his salt and pepper hair, round glasses, and razor-sharp eyes, Jeff was known for his tough questions, unafraid to challenge power. He stood there, microphone in hand, ready to charge into battle. Karoline opened her remarks, her voice clear and confident.
"Hey everyone. I'm here today to talk about the executive order the President will sign this afternoon deporting illegal immigrants who commit serious crimes, rape, murder, brutal violence, out of this country. Those guys could be held at Guantanamo Bay before they go. This is a promise the President made to the American people, and we're making it happen. I'm ready for your questions."
The room fell silent, only the scratch of pens on paper breaking the hush. Jeff Carter shot to his feet, his voice low but brimming with defiance.
"Karoline, I want to cut to the chase. The Washington Post reports that migrants held at Guantanamo for the past 2 weeks were rarely let outside, were shackled, locked in cages, and said they weren't treated like human beings. Does the White House have any response to those conditions, or is this just a show of strength to please voters?"
All eyes zeroed in on Karoline. She stood still for a second, taking a deep breath, then fired back, her voice cold but sharp as a blade.
Jeff, this isn't a show. It's keeping a promise. The President campaigned loud and clear. If you breach our borders, break our laws, then commit heinous crimes like raping, killing innocent women and girls, or unleashing brutal violence, you're getting deported. Guantanamo's the holding spot before they're gone. We're talking about criminals, dangerous ones, not innocent folks fleeing war. You want to feel sorry for them? Go ask the victims' families what they think.
Murmurs rose up, a few scattered claps breaking through. Jeff stepped closer, his leather shoes striking hard against the floor, his voice rising high and thick with sarcasm.
"Criminals or not, treating them like animals. What's that say about us, lowering ourselves? Reports say they're locked in cages, Karoline. Cages, rarely seeing sunlight, shackled like wild beasts. Is this America or some medieval prison? Doesn't the White House see this goes against human rights values?"
Karoline leaned forward, her eyes sparking with fire, her voice booming like thunder.
Human rights values, Jeff. Human rights values are about protecting Americans, law-abiding, decent folks, from invaders who slaughter them. You say cages? I call it a security measure to keep those criminals from escaping or causing more harm. Who do you want human rights for? The girls who get raped, the mothers who lose kids to these creeps, or the criminals who don't belong here? We choose Americans. 77 million who voted President Trump to do just that.
The audience erupted, applause mixing with boos ringing through the room. Jeff raised his hand, his voice dropping low but still sharp.
I'm not denying we need to protect Americans, Karoline, but locking them up in Guantanamo? A place with a global bad rap? What about that? Sure, he might be a criminal, but shackling them, caging them like that? No fair trial, no transparency. That damages America's image. Why not deport them straight away? Why even need Guantanamo?
Karoline flashed a faint smile, a cold one with no warmth, her voice low but brimming with authority.
Jeff, you think deportation's just a snap of the fingers and done? These guys have no papers, no clear identity. Plenty of them resist to the end. Guantanamo's a middle step to process, verify, make sure they don't come back. America's image. I care more about America's safety than its image, in the eyes of far-off critics. You want transparency? Here's transparency. We don't tolerate immigrant criminals.
Simple as that. Jeff pushed his glasses up, his voice rising again, full of doubt.
Simple? Not even close, Karoline. Holding them at Guantanamo costs American taxpayers millions of dollars to keep that place running. Why not use that money for the people in California and North Carolina you say got left behind? And if they're criminals, why not try them in the US first, instead of shipping them off to some far-flung island? This is dodging legal responsibility, not a solution.
The room held its breath, the frantic scratch of pens on paper cutting through. Karoline stepped out from the podium, standing center stage, her eyes blazing, her voice ringing like a bell.
Dodging? Jeff, you're dead wrong. Holding them at Guantanamo saves American lives. Saves the justice system from drawn-out trials with paperless criminals. Try them in the U.S. You want those guys sitting in American jails, eating taxpayer money, then using lawyers to stall deportation? No way. We're cutting that loop short. California and North Carolina need cash to rebuild, not to feed immigrant murderers. This is a practical fix, not empty theory.
Jeff took a step back, but he wouldn't give up, his voice hoarse with emotion.
Practical. You call locking people in cages practical? The Washington Post says they don't get outside, aren't treated like humans. Do you even think about humanity? Or is it just numbers? How many deported, how many locked up? With no care for how we do it. This isn't the America I know.
Karoline stood tall, her gaze locked on Jeff, her voice softening but still cutting like a blade.
Humanity? Jeff, I think about humanity every day. The humanity of American families who've lost loved ones to these creeps. Have you ever met a mother crying at her daughter's grave, killed by an illegal immigrant? I have. You want to talk about the America you know? That's the America of hardworking, honest folks threatened by criminals who don't belong here? Guantanamo's no hotel. Damn right. Because it's not for guests. It's for those who chose to ditch their humanity when they committed heinous crimes.
A roaring wave of applause erupted, drowning out the boos from one corner of the audience. Jeff raised his hand, his voice trembling but still firm.
I'm not defending criminals, Karoline, but locking them up there with no transparency. No one knows who's held, how long, what the conditions are. That's a gap for abuse of power. If they're dangerous, prove it in court. If not, we're setting a precedent to lock up anyone without reason.
Don't you see the risk? Karoline stepped closer to the stage's edge, her eyes blazing, her voice rising and falling like an oration.
Risk? Jeff, the real risk is letting these creeps roam free on American soil. Transparency? We're transparent with Americans. Anyone who crosses the border illegally and commits brutal crimes gets deported. Guantanamo's a tool, not the goal. You want courts. American courts are swamped with thousands of cases a year. We're not letting these guys exploit the system to stay. This is protection, not abuse. Got any data? Hundreds of murders, rapes by immigrant criminals over the past decade. That's the risk I won't accept.
Jeff gripped his microphone tight, his voice fading, but still defiant.
Protection's necessary, but this way, locking them in Guantanamo doesn't fix the root. People still cross, crimes still happen. Why not invest in the border, stop them from the start? This is just a surface fix, Karoline.
Karoline smiled, this time a victorious grin, her voice hitting like nails in a coffin.
Jeff, you just proved why we're doing this. The border's a priority. Walls, patrols, tech, we're building it all. But what about the ones already here, already committing crimes? Let them run free until the border's perfect. No way. We act now. Deport, detain, protect. Guantanamo's not the whole solution. It's the first step to taking back security. You want the route? Here's the route. Zero tolerance for immigrant criminals.
The audience exploded, applause overpowering the protests. Jeff sat down, his eyes still sharp, but out of words. Karoline stood center stage, her gaze sweeping the crowd, her voice dropping low, brimming with conviction.
This is the promise President Trump made, protecting Americans from those who don't belong here. We're not doing this out of hate, but for justice. The girls who've been raped, the families who've lost loved ones. They're why we fight. Guantanamo's a tool, deportation's the goal. You want to argue? Look Americans in the eye and tell them they don't deserve safety.
Applause thundered, stretching on for minutes. Jeff bowed his head to scribble notes, his face tense but silent. As the lights dimmed, Karoline left the stage with a steadfast stride, leaving the room brimming with mixed emotions. Support tangled with doubt. That afternoon, President Trump signed the executive order, officially deporting illegal immigrant criminals, with Guantanamo as a way station. Karoline Leavitt, with her razor-sharp wit and unrelenting arguments, won the debate against Jeff Carter. She didn't just defend the policy. She turned it into a symbol of justice, a promise to Americans that their security comes first. Jeff, though persistent in his questioning, couldn't break through the wall of logic and emotion Karoline built. This order got massive support from the 77 million who voted for Trump, people who believe immigrant criminals are a threat that needs to be wiped out pronto. It brings real benefits, protecting communities, sending a tough message that America won't tolerate violence from outsiders. But at what cost? The nation's image takes a hit in the world's eyes. Questions about human rights still hang in the air, and the risk of overreach isn't fully answered. The security payoff is clear, but the trade-off in morals and long-term costs leaves a big question mark. As the dust settled, the order stood firm, at least for today, thanks to Karoline's razor-sharp edge. But does it really solve the problem, or is it just a fleeting flame in the immigration storm? The answer lies in the future, in the hands of Americans and the families they're shielding. So, what do you think about this order? Drop a comment below. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. We'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.